This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of the podcast, you can. You can email quocast@outlook.com. That's quocast@outlook.com. You can tweet at the Quo-Cast on Twitter, or you can check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/the Quo-Cast. Has it really been 10 years since the first Frantic Four reunion tour, which followed obviously the reunion in the Hello Quo movie from a year or two prior? And oh my goodness, what a whirlwind time to be a fan. The event that we never thought would happen happened. The Frantic Four, Francis Rossi, Rick Parfitt, Alan Lancaster and John Coughlin got together on stage once more to entertain thousands of people. What a tour that was. It started in Manchester and then ended at Wembley, where it was filmed, and I got to see the one in the middle, which was Hammersmith Apollo, Odeon, whatever you like to call it, on the 16th of March. What a day. I don't think I will ever forget it. That particular day was it was unforgettable, wasn't it? Anybody who went to any of those gigs can say exactly the same thing, because we just never thought that this event would happen. And the weird thing is, a couple of years prior to this, I'd actually spoken to Alan Lancaster, which is available on this podcast. And I remember someone saying, if only you'd asked him about the possibility of a reunion, it would have been my favourite interview ever. And that is always one of those kick yourself moments, because you think, if I'd asked him, would he have said so? Because a few months later, he was filming Hello Quo, and I don't think we knew at that point that that was happening. So who knows on that score? But those four guys on stage for the first time since 1981 was just as great as you think it would be, right? Because that day, I travelled down on the train. I found the venue, met some people whom I had been talking to in the Quo community for many, many years. I mean, even just that was amazing. Even as somebody who doesn't have many friends locally who were Quo fans, certainly at that time, it's just wonderful to be in the room with lots of people whom share that same interest as you. And I went along to a pub along the road there, and I think Status Quo were playing a set in there, and everybody knew the words to everything. And that's when you knew this was a special thing, because I had seen Quo a couple of times in the modern or new lineup. Previously, I saw them at Skegness in 2007 and in 2011 on the Isle of Wight as part of a festival. But this was something different. There seemed to be a lot of fans who hadn't seen Quo for a little while, as well as those who always went, you know? So it was a wonderful mix of people. And I remember walking into the Apollo, just the anticipation, right? Sitting in your seat, watching the support act, seeing that there is a curtain with the Hello album signal on it, sign. And just the anticipation that something is going to happen that hasn't happened for a long time. And boy, was it worth the wait. I managed to get a seated ticket. And the funny thing is, right, I logged on to the website to book, and it sold out very quickly. It was someone else who wasn't going on the message board, and they said, oh, you can buy it off me for the price I paid, sort of thing. So I bought from them. If I hadn't have done, I wouldn't have been able to have gone. And so I'm sat there in the Apollo with the Hello album sign there, and obviously you get that sort of anticipation thumping sound. The noise is quite loud at this point, but then Jackie Linton's recording from the 1977 live album comes on. Is there anybody out there who wants to rock? The loudest crowd noise I think I have ever heard, certainly in a place like that. What sound that was. And that is when I knew this is going to be even more special than I could have ever imagined. Then the curtain went down upon Status Quo, the word Status Quo in Jackie Linton's speech, which was very cleverly edited. The fact that they started with Junior's wailing, but it was the basically the album version rather than the live version, which is fine. It was just great to hear those four guys. I am still 10 years later lost for words. I mean, what a set list. And the fact that I'd never heard Alan Lancaster sing live before. Really, I was introduced to Alan Lancaster as a live performer through the 1974 Wembley footage on the Party Ain't Over Yet DVD. I remember seeing him sing Backwater and seeing Just Take Me with John's sort of drum bit and feeling in awe of that. And then seeing it in person. And there's a bit in your brain that says, wait a minute, I'm at the Hammersmith Apollo watching Alan Lancaster and John Coughlan belt out Backwater, Just Take Me, the drum part, the singing, the everything about it, and Rossi just nailing those parts. It sounded like they'd gone back and they'd listened to the album and they were trying to get it as close as they possibly could. And then it went into more Alan Lancaster stuff, Is There a Better Way as well, which I feel like it was in the set for a while, sung by Rick, but Alan, to hear the original vocalist do it was something special, I think. And then obviously into In My Chair, Blue-Eyed Lady, which had never been played before. Why? I don't know, because it almost could have been a single, couldn't it? It could have been a single off the Hello album, possibly very successful as well. I mean, what a solo. It might have changed the fortunes had they done that a little bit, maybe gone in a slightly different direction. Then Little Lady most of the time, April, Spring, Summer and Wednesdays, which was nice to hear some of those early Quo numbers, wasn't it? So some of the stuff that maybe hadn't been heard for a long time. And then obviously Railroad, the full version of Railroad with Bob Young coming on. I mean, again, Bob Young comes on, plays harmonica, and you're like, wait a minute, this is incredible. And you can see that, yeah, the guys have aged and it isn't 1974 or whatever anymore, but there was just something, I think it was Rick Parfitt that said in the jam session on the Hello Quo DVD that they filmed, that some of it ended up being used in that film. He said, it's weird how when we play together, the four guys, it sounds like us then. And I think I would agree, because there was something about that sound that was just slightly on the heavier side perhaps, but there was just something about it that was very throwbacky, very kind of vintagey, heavy, old school Quo. And then after Railroad, which is quite long, but what a joy. I mean, slow blues, fast blues, that riff that they've been playing in medleys for years, done in its entirety. Wonderful. Oh Baby, another album track, which I don't think had ever been played live. I think it got played in a session with John Peel back in the early 70s. But other than that, again, why has that never been played? 4,500 times into Rain. Now, it's worth noting that in 2013, they sort of did the version that the modern lineup have been doing for the last, for the last few years. So it kind of segged into Rain in a specific way. I think the next year they said, we need to find a way of making it even more Frantic Four. And this is the thing. I think that whole show was kind of built around that. But the fact that that particular version, I mean, the next year when they started doing those extra solos and stuff, I so wish I'd seen that. because what a thing, to hear some of those extra solos and that the next year. On the DVD, it was amazing, but I bet live it was something special, because to me, that particular moment is the Frantic Four. Whenever you hear that, it's like you're transported back to 1973, and that's the moment, Show any non-Quo fan anything, it's those few seconds. But that wasn't present in that, but I was still happy that I was hearing 4,500 times by the Frantic Four. And obviously Rain into Big Fat Mama, which of course is the classic. It's one of the early classics from Pile Driver. To hear them rock it out, I mean, Rick was on fire. He was wearing a leather jacket that night. It was just really cool. Into Down Down, their number one single, which I know there would have been some fans who would have expected them to play hits. I mean, I did talk to somebody on Twitter afterwards who said, we went to see Status Quo at the Hammersmith Apollo and they didn't play any of their hits, or whatever it was. Whatever it was they said, it was obviously they were expecting to see the modern lineup. And I did have a little chat and I said, well, they were trying to recreate the live album from 77. And they said, oh, I wish we'd known that. And maybe that was something that they improved the next year when they did the next tour, and it said Frantic Four on the marquee, Status Quo, Frantic Four. The first year it didn't. It just said Status Quo. So, of course, there was going to be a little bit of confusion. And I feel like when I logged into the Ticketmaster website, it still had, the modern lineup on it. So there was a bit of confusion there. But to hear Down Down, and I know those fans, I think if they stuck Rockin' All Over the World in there, I think most of those fans may have been satisfied. I think that's probably the track people are waiting for, as well as Whatever You Want. But for the fan who knew what this was great to hear predominantly album stuff, things that were live favourites from many years ago, and hearing them done by the lineup that made them famous. Then into Roadhouse Blues, again, to hear Alan's faultless vocal on that was amazing. Parfit's rhythm with that, I have no idea how he does it. I've just started to pick up the guitar again, and I can't do it. I just can't do it. It just, there's some muting thing going on. Some guitarist will have to tell me one day how this works. Then obviously Don't Waste My Time, live favourite, got everybody up. I mean, everyone was up the entire gig. I kind of wish I'd been in the standing, but alas, no. I'm glad to be sat down, at this point. Although I don't think I did much sitting down. I think I was stood up too in my seat. So Bye Bye Johnny. Again, to hear Alan Lancaster do these songs was a treat. And this whole thing was a treat. I absolutely adored this concert. And unfortunately, I missed my last train home and had to wait in a train station, several train stations, pretty much all night, and then got home at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning because I waited too long afterwards. I think after the gig, I was so in awe of it. I was like, should I get a shirt? I mean, all this time later, I do wish I'd picked up a tour T-shirt. At the moment, they're currently advertising a 10-year anniversary shirt on the Quo website. Might pick it up. It might not be too late. It's never too late. What a gig. What are your memories of that gig? Those are mine. Certainly. I think at several points I was crying during that gig, thinking I never thought I would see this. As a Quo fan who became a fan in 1997, I never thought I would live to see this, like that this would be a thing in my lifetime. I mean, I say that because, maybe they would have gone down the route of like holograms or something later, or some kind of thing, because Quo have been prone to gimmicks in the past. And speaking of gimmicks and other projects, shortly after this, they did the Boo Le Quo project. In the middle, I think it was that summer, which was such a contrast wasn't it? It was very it was good actually to see Quo on the big screen, but that is another subject. We're talking about the Frantic Four. I think Dan, who's been on the podcast many times, he said at the Minehead convention recently, the way in which John Coughlan plays the drums to April, Spring, Summer and Wednesdays could only be Coughlan. It's kind of the way that he does it and that kind of shuffle thing. And I think that's what I think all this time later with the 2013 gig is that I heard things played in a way I'd possibly never, it was played in such a unique way, I think. I'm just rambling now, aren't I? What are your memories of this gig? Please do let me know.